Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k Tyranids. We've got another unit review for you today. This time we're going to be looking at the Trygon from the Tyranid Codex. So we're going to go through the data card, of course, give a Planet 40k rating at the end of the video, talk about all the synergy in the middle, and yeah, let's get into it I suppose. So let's start with the keywords here. So we've got the monster keyword, Great Devourer, Trygon. Really it's all about the monster keyword. That's the only real keyword of note. He is of course 180 points. He used to be 160. Although 9th edition is quite a way away. In fact, we've had our index in between that, so not relevant anymore, right? So let's just move into the statistics, I suppose. So we've got a movement of 10 inches, toughness 10, armor save of a 3+, wounds 14, leadership 8+, and objective control is 4. So pretty rapid in terms of movement. Toughness is tough, it's toughness 10, could be more, but I think that's okay, toughness 10. 3 armor with 14 wounds is also pretty resilient, pretty tanky. And I'm not unhappy with that. OC I think could have gone to 5, but 4 is okay, 4 is enough. Ability wise, he's got Deep Strike, of course. Deep Strike is going to be one of the key things about this model, especially with his unique ability that we're going to go over in a moment. Synapse is his faction ability. If he is within Synapse range, which is sometimes he will be, sometimes he won't because of the nature of how he enters the battlefield. Datasheet ability, or unique ability is what I like to call it, Subterranean Tunnels. This one is cool and this is the reason you take the Trygon. So each time this model is set up on the battlefield using the Deep Strike ability, it can be set up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 3 inches horizontally from all enemy units. When doing so, if this model is set up within 9 inches or more of one or more enemy units, until the end of the turn, you're not eligible to declare a charge. So you can come in virtually 3.1 inches away from enemy units, but you can't charge. If you do come in the standard way, more than 9 inches away, then you can charge. So you've got an option when you're coming in from Deep Strike, which is kind of cool because that's going to interact with things like secondaries. We'll get onto that in a moment. But before we do, I wanted to talk about one of the stratagems from the core rulebook, which I think is going to relate to this massively, which is Rapid Ingress. Now Rapid Ingress, normally I'm talking about breaching through ruins when you're an infantry or beast. This guy is of course a monster, or this thing is a monster, so that isn't going to happen. However, Rapid Ingress simply just means you can come in as if it was your movement phase or your reinforcement step of your movement phase. And you're doing it in your opponent's turn, in your opponent's movement phase. So you could use your Subterranean Tunnels ability. You can come in 3.1 inches away from enemy units, and then the end of that turn happens because it's not your turn, it's your opponent's turn. When it comes down to your turn, you're free to charge, and you're only literally 3 inches away. Well, yeah, you need a 3-inch charge at that point because that's what you need. So that is a way of getting around that whole, get close but you can't do the charge move. You just pay 1 CP Rapid Ingress. It's also going to cause a lot of problems for your opponent because now all of a sudden there's a Trygon virtually 3 inches away, and they got to deal with it. There's no choice, they have to deal with it. So in fact, there's one more thing. There is a damage. If you're below 5 wounds, then it's a -1 to the hit rolls. Just bear that in mind throughout the rest of the video, I suppose. So what's cool about the Trygon, he's got a ranged attack as well as a melee attack, or weapons, which is nice. So the ranged weapon is the Bioelectric Pulse. You're getting 6 attacks with your 12-inch range. So 12-inch range, 6 attacks, sustain hits 2 as well. You're hitting on 3s, so the average of that is you just get 6 hits. Because of course you're going to be missing 2 out of 6 on average, but one of them will be a 6, which will give you sustained hits 2, and that will give you a misses back, on average of course. You've got strength 5, no AP, 1 damage. Now this is a really good anti-light infantry weapon, mainly used to delete screens, so that you can actually charge the juicy stuff that you want to charge. Although if you are doing it from Deep Strike at maybe 9 inches, then that makes it a little bit more difficult because the screen will be closer and maybe you've just extended the charge move, but maybe you're not. Maybe you're just doing a 3-inch charge and you come with Rapid Ingress. So there's lots of different things you could do with that to eliminate screens. Little gaunts, gaunts is what we have. Little scarabs if you're going up against Necrons. Just little screens that are in the way from the juicy stuff. Now the melee weapon is the Trygon Scything Talons with 12 attacks. Hit on 3s, strength 9, -2 AP, and a flat 3 damage. So quite a nasty weapon there. In melee, you're going to hit an average of 8 times out of the 12 because your weapon skill 3+. That's totally murdering toughness 4 stuff. entire units are going to get wiped there, really, because of the AP's high, the damage is high. It's also quite nasty against heavy infantry as well, and even light vehicles. You can start terrorizing them too. Now the standard monsters and vehicles, you're going to be wounded on 5s, anything toughness 10 or more you're wounded on 5s. But once you do get through, you're going to have a flat 3 damage per wound that goes through, which is pretty good. It's pretty nice. So next we're going to talk about the key detachment, which is the Crusher Stampede, which is the Monster Mash detachment that we've got from the new codex. And with the Enraged Behemoths, we've got a +1 to the hit rolls if we're below starting strength for the hit rolls of the range attacks as well as the melee attacks. And what's cool is this thing has both, so that's nice. And if you're below starting strength, no, not below starting strength, if you're below half strength, you're going to get a +1 to the wound roll as well. So below starting strength, a +1 to hit, below half strength, a +1 to wound, which is cool. I mean, you will be hitting on 2s at both range and melee. As soon as you lose a single wound, hitting on 2s is good. And you've also got the chance of a +1 to wound, which is again both range and melee. That could be doing some serious work. I mean, you're already strength 9 with the Tyranid Talons, so that could be really good, really serious stuff there. So let's talk about the stratagems that can relate to the Crusher Stampede. Most, if not all of them, I think there's 5 out of 6 that will relate. The Deadly Demise one ain't going to work because he hasn't got Deadly Demise. But you can talk about the Rampaging Monstrosities, for example, which is pretty much a reroll on your hit rolls. Now you're already hitting on 2s potentially with the detachment roll, so it won't be as useful. You've got the Savage Roar, so you're forcing Battle Shock. Then it's a -1 to your enemy units' hit rolls when they are in the fight phase. And if they did fail the Battle Shock test, it's a -1 to their wound roll as well, and their Battle Shock, so they're losing OC, they can't use stratagems. That one is quite useful. You've got Untrembled Ferocity, which is another 1 command point one, when you can pretty much move through enemy models as if they were friendly. Now when you're doing this one, you've got to bear in mind, you've got to imagine they were friendly units for a moment. Can a monster go through a friendly monster? The answer is no. It can go through friendly infantry, but monsters and vehicles can't go through other monsters and vehicles. So you can't use this stratagem to go through monsters and vehicles. It's only infantry that would literally part out the way for you. So you've got to bear that one in mind first. Second of all, you've got to make sure there's enough space, because you need to end your movement more than 1 inch away from enemy units. So make sure there is enough space before you actually pop in the stratagem. But the reasons for using this stratagem is just to kind of go past the screen. Now of course you've got the ranged weapon that you could potentially just remove the screens with anyway. But if you felt like you weren't going to necessarily do it, you can pop this stratagem off instead. But this happens in your movement phase, so you kind of got to make a decision back then in your movement phase. Am I able to shoot this screen out of the way? If not, let's do the stratagem. Because once you've done your shots and you've failed and the screen's still in the way, you can't then go back and start walking through them or charging through them, because you've already done movement, haven't you? So that one you could use. You've then got Swarm Guided Salvos, which is in your shooting phase to ignore cover. Now you're not going to be doing that on units that have got an armor save of a 3+, because they can't have cover to a 2+ against 0 AP weapons. But anything else, you want to make sure that they're not gaining cover. And Massive Impact is the last one that's worth talking about today, which is done in your charge phase, just after you've ended your charge move. You basically pick up 6 dice, you roll the 6 dice, and any 4+ rolls, enemy unit suffers a mortal wound. So on average you're looking at 3 mortal wounds, which is nice against the tougher units, Terminators, or anything with an in-1 save. You're literally bypassing the in-1 save because you're throwing mortal wounds out now. Just be a little bit careful with this one, because remember your Sliding Talons are damage 3. And let's say you go put in, you're going up against Terminators with 4 wounds because they've got the shields, and you do an average of 3. You get 3 mortal wounds out and you leave him on 1 wound. Well, it's kind of wasteful now, because your Sliding Talons would have done 3 damage anyway. So it's almost like the equivalent of you just doing 1 mortal wound for a CP. So you just got to make sure you think about it before you actually use that one. Against 1 wound models, of course, that's probably better, but then you're kind of wasting your talents. You shouldn't really be against that kind of unit. But maybe the bigger units that have, the vehicles and the monsters, that might be better, because all the damage is going on to the 1 model. So yeah, just watch out with that one. So let's think about, what are we doing with Trygon? What are we doing with it in game? What are we scoring? How are we using him? So the first thing is you're doing the deep strike ability. That's the main thing. Whether it's at 9 inches or 3 inches, you've kind of got to make a decision. He's also going to be harassing. That's the second main thing really. Once he does pop in, he is going to have the biggest target on his back ever. So your opponent is going to have to deal with it, especially if you go for the short one, because if you go for the 3-inch deep strike, your opponent has no choice. They have to deal with it. You're going to make the charge move in your next turn. Maybe you're on an objective all of a sudden. They have to deal with it. He's an immediate threat, effectively. So they're going to have to spend time, they're going to have to spend attacks, and you may not even last, which is a problem in itself. You may have just thrown a unit away, 180 points down the drain. Distraction maybe your opponent has lost an entire round of shooting or fighting, but 180 points is 180 points. That's a problem. So ideally, as we mentioned, you use him in the Crusher Stampede, but you can also use him in other detachments just as a distraction. Maybe you want to use him in the Unending Swarm detachment. Of course, he is not a gaunt, he's not got the Endless Multitude ability or keyword, but if you put him as a distraction, it's going to let all your gaunts go up the battlefield unscathed. Then you're going to gain OC, all the no man's land will be flooded with gaunts. You're going to be scoring your primaries, maybe you're going to start doing your secondaries, all while your opponent is dealing with a Trygon. So something else to think about. Other detachments will work. But yeah, going back to the main part here, the real question is, are you doing the 9-inch deep strike or are you doing the 3-inch deep strike? If you're doing the 9-inch deep strike, you can charge. If you're doing the 3-inch, you can't, unless you've used Rapid Ingress. If you are wanting to use him in melee, then of course the 9-inch charge is the better option. Again, unless you're using Rapid Ingress. But then you do run the risk of him going in your opponent's turn. You might not even make it to your turn. So you've got to be careful with that. But the real bread and butter of this model is doing the 3-inch deep strike, and the reason for it is the secondaries. That's what he's all about. It's the secondary scoring. He's got OC4, it could be better, but maybe you've just pulled a card and it's capture enemy outpost, which is it 7 or 8 victory points? I think it's 7, just for gaining that. So of course he's going to be coming in, he's going to be still shooting with his ranged weapons. He's not going to be charging, but OC4, maybe you capture enemy outpost. Maybe it's going to assist you with engage on all fronts. Maybe it's behind enemy lines. Maybe it's just to get onto that primary. Maybe it's just to get there. Maybe it's storm hostile objective, overwhelming force, all those kind of secondaries that relate to pushing your opponent off objectives or just taking objectives in the no man's land or your opponent's areas. This is going to do it. I mean, there's even a bit of an oddball secondary that you could do that, I mean, I personally wouldn't, but you could. If you're not going to go for the charge move because you've come in 3 inches away, you could go for deploy teleport homers. A little bit wasteful when 180 points is probably cheaper ways of doing it. But if you're going to forego those shots at range and you can't charge anyway, it could be the man to do it. Or it could be the thing to do it, the monster to do it, I suppose. But yeah, the main thing to do here is to think about the secondaries, think about your cards. And if there's no card relation to when he's coming in, if he comes in and he's not doing any of the cards, then you've been a bit lucky. Maybe you want to wait another turn, maybe turn 3. See what card you pull in turn 3. And if you've still not got the cards by turn 3, I mean, he's got to come in anyway at that point. And that way, you may as well either do the Rapid Ingress or the 9-inch charge, because he's not doing much else. But overall, bottom line, the problem is 180 points. That's just too expensive for me. There are cheaper harassment units, there are cheaper units that can do the melee stuff, there are cheaper units that can do the shooty stuff. We've got a lot of melee stuff really. But 180 points, you're talking kind of Screamer Killer level here, like where we're getting kind of robbed for points. I think he should have probably been sort of around the 150 mark, maybe the 145 mark. 180 is just way too much. But let's get onto our Planet 40k rating today. He's not bad. In fact, the ability is quite unique and it's quite cool, and it is definitely going to mess up your opponent in terms of what they're going to do. But there's just cheaper things to have in your list. So for that reason, I'm going to go with the Planet 40k rating of 3 out of 5 stars.